technology approaches to the drivers. And now that we have a capsule that ignites, we need to figure out, can we make it simpler and more repeatable? Can we begin to do it more than one time a day? Each of these is an incredible scientific and engineering challenge. So I think it really is important to keep us on that pathway. And with investment and a real focus, that time scale can move closer.
But they're still talking decades. Last time the National Ignition Facility NIV made progress in August last year, fusion expert Kate Lancaster at York University came on the programme to explain the physics, how 100 million degree temperatures and pressures like those in the sun's centre force deuterium and tritium isotopes to fuse together to make helium atoms and neutrons lots of heat. So we asked her back again. The basic engineering was the same then as now, as explained by Marv Adams, crushing unpelleted fusion fuel with overwhelming pressure from X-rays themselves created by a 192 laser flash. But it seems that tiny, detailed changes were what doubled the output fusion energy.
What I would say is, up to the point last August, there were some fairly radical changes, both to the fuel capsule, the little gold can it sits in, which is called the hull round, which the lasers heat to produce the X-rays, which to compress the capsule, and then also how the laser beams are distributed in the hull itself. So they're the sort of levers you can pull. And there were quite a lot of radical changes with that regard. Now, from August to now, I think what's happened is what I would describe as kind of deep refinement, let's say, to refine the design both in how the laser energy is deposited and also the quality of the targets, which I think are the two levers they've pulled this time, such that they've reached this kind of critical moment where the energy out has exceeded the laser energy in.
So I think we both listened to the technical discussion at the press conference afterwards, and those are the things that interested me. One was that they said this isn't just brute force, that when they fire these lasers, even though the pulse itself is extraordinarily short, they can actually change the way it grows in intensity, they can change the pattern of where it's shining on, which just astonished me.
Oh yeah, it isn't just a case of, hi, we've shined some lasers inside a hole which then heats up and produces X-rays. It's really much more exquisitely complicated than that, in a sense that you don't want to just whack all the laser energy into the capsule, because that basically would raise the internal energy inside the capsule such that you wouldn't be able to compress it properly. So you have to do it in such an exquisitely staged manner that you can get much more compression than you would have if you just slapped it really hard.
I mean, I guess in my mind, this is a bit like as it starts to heat up, then it tries to expand. So then you have to push harder, and then it's still trying to expand. And so to try and hold this nanoscale star in one place, you just have to keep on upping the pressure almost.
Yeah, in effect, that's what's happening, right? So you are always in competition with disassembly. So essentially, you need to compress the fuel and have it burn enough fuel before the whole thing disassembles. That's the constant battle we have, because there's no active confinement, let's say. You're just kind of using the inertia of the fuel itself to keep itself together for long enough such that you burn enough fuel before the whole thing disassembles. That's the ultimate crux of the confinement in inertial confinement.
And they talked about these tiny little, I mean, I forgot how small they are, these tiny little diamond spheres inside which the fusion fuel is frosted in, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And they have within them little imperfections, which I guess are a bit like imperfections in frosted glass, a distortion which changes the interaction quality.
Yeah, so I think it was really surprising to people actually when they started doing these kind of ignition scale experiments, and just how important minuscule imperfections in the ice layer. So essentially, in order to have deuterium and tritium solid, it has to be cryogenically cold, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to spend time growing these ice layers. I think these capsules take like 7 months to manufacture, only for us to blow it up in a fraction of a second, right? So you have to be okay with that. And these tiny imperfections, because the whole capsule is around a peppercorn, so 1 or 2 millimeters, right? And the sort of imperfections and voids that we're talking about here are sort of the size of bacteria, right? That's what they were saying on the press release. And so these tiny little micro defects are the things that need to get rid of in order for these exquisitely symmetric implosions to happen.
And this sort of language about breakthroughs, about free energy forever and so on. I mean, this has been the flavour of fusion reporting for decades now. I don't know quite how to balance the excitement that it works as well as it does against the expectations.
Yeah, I mean, in a way with fusion, because it's a long-term goal, you kind of have to keep the dream alive a bit by being very excited when you have these kind of breakthroughs. And this is actually a really important one, even though it's incremental in the sense of we're far away from net energy, in the sense that obviously you're putting 300 megajoules into the laser before that's even interacting with the target. But that being said, a lot of the technological challenges around much more efficient lasers, mass production of targets, collection of huge volumes of data and so forth, which are all important for moving forward into an energy generation scenario, are being solved as we speak. So it's not like we've just sort of sat back and gone, oh well, we'll just wait for ignition and then see what happens. This stuff has been going on in the background as well. Now, that's not to say tomorrow we can get energy out and everything, but what this has done is opened a door to enable us to develop strategy moving forward for if we do really want, and we are really serious about not inertial confinement fusion, but inertial fusion energy, what do we need to do to get from point A to point B, which I think is still a decade away potentially, but it all comes down to money. If you threw a load of money at this, the problem would go away quite quickly, I reckon.
Money more than the long wait, the unavoidable choke in fusion research, thanks to Kate Lancaster for being so enthusiastic and so clear. Maybe in 75 years, some BBC presenter will be celebrating the fusion breakthrough of December the 5th. This week on Friday, all of us should be celebrating the moment a physicist, Walter Bratton, passed electric current through the world's first transistor 75 years ago. Like fusion, the basic groundwork had been laid during World War II, in radar in this case. But here was the crude electrically driven switch, which is the basis of all electronics today. I went to Bell Labs, the birthplace, and to Silicon Valley in 1997 for the 50th anniversary to meet some of the pioneers.
The transistor certainly has to be ranked right up there with the most important inventions of the 20th century.
Including Gordon Moore. Yes, Gordon Moore of Moore's Law, the rule of unending improvements in electronics, and co-founder of microchip giant Intel, brought into the industry by one of the other inventors of the transistor, Bill Shockley.
Certainly the invention of language has to rank right up there. And the printed record, to be able to accumulate knowledge from generation to generation, the dissemination of knowledge through the printing press, these are all things that I consider to be major inventions of mankind. But the transistor, as an enabling invention of the information revolution, I think deserves a very important position.
Well, I spoke to Gordon Moore for that last significant anniversary in 1997. Mobile phones weren't really a thing, laptops were clunky, smart TVs don't make me daft. But we were bowled over by the idea of computer chips that had 7.5 million components squeezed onto them, whirring away as we searched the internet or edited radio reports. At Bell Labs in New Jersey, I got to see that very first standalone jerry-rigged transistor, the one that kicked off the revolution in 1947, guided by an old-timer, Walter Brown.
Well, this apparatus is really remarkable, crude-looking on the present scale. There's a little slab of germanium that's sitting on a brass plate. It's held down with sort of a paperclip spring that pushes on a wedge-shaped insulator, pushing down on the germanium. And then there's a ribbon of gold which runs along the edge, and that's been split. You can't tell it from here. It's been split right at the apex, so that there are two gold parts of the ribbon, each one of which has an electrical connection to it, and the germanium has a third electrical connection. And those make the three contacts of the device.
The point being to show that by applying a voltage to the germanium sliver, you could control the current flowing from one gold strip to the other, a kind of electronic dimmer switch. And despite all the other changes, that's essentially what's going on millions and billions of times over inside your radio, phone or laptop. This seems to be talking. It was at Gordon Moore's first company, Fairchild, that they showed how to put first 4, then a few tens, hundreds, thousands, and then over the years, millions of transistors onto a sliver of silicon, easy to manufacture with germanium, heralding the revolution's second wave, the integrated circuit.
The real advantage of integrated circuits is the decrease in the cost of electronics. More of that than the increased speed or decreased power in the hands. But today, you can buy a transistor for 1/10 millionth of the price of transistors were sold in the late 1950s. No other manufacturing product that I can identify has undergone a similar decrease in price. This is truly unique. And it's a result of the unique technology that lets us make these integrated circuits.
But during that anniversary, there was a bit of a feel that the road was running out, that the techniques for cramming yet more components onto a chip looked like they couldn't keep going for more than a decade. They were desperate searches for new approaches I heard about, and that the underlying physics that made transistors possible seemed also to be in danger.
The atomic nature of matter starts to impact the electrical properties of the devices we're buying. So we'll probably figure out how to get around those problems a little bit longer, but something between a tenth and 100th of a micrometer minimum feature size, I believe we're going to find that when the physics changes sufficiently, devices don't work the way that you would circuits anymore. That's going to be a real limit on how far we can go with power.
But fear not, your gadgets are crammed with transistors way smaller than that already, and manufacturers are looking to making components just 2 thousandths of a micron or 2 nanometers across in the next year or so. That's why. Among the engineers who've kept the revolution alive, J. King Yu, Dean of Engineering at the University of California, Berkeley, just reached the bay of Silicon Valley. CJ, I really did think it was all going to be over in a matter of years after that celebration. How have you kept making things smaller and better?
Well, it took a lot of teamwork, a lot of innovation, and collaboration across industry and academia.
And a lot of full power.
Yes, one unique aspect of our industry is that as we shrunk the size of a transistor so that it could fit more of them on a single integrated circuit or microchip, we automatically got improvements in circuit performance and also in lowering the power consumption or energy consumed for operation. And at the same time, we got lower cost per integrated circuit function. And because of this, all we had to do was focus on shrinking the transistor steadily a little bit every 2 years. And this enabled the industry to grow in terms of market applications for integrated circuits. And as companies produce revenue, then they could invest further to advance the technology. So that's what enabled the industry to set a roadmap, because we could project about 10 years into the future all the challenges that we would face if we had to shrink transistors continually for the next 10 years.
You make it sound so simple, but for me, these things are so small. You can't, obviously you can't touch them with your fingers. Yet you're making billions of components that fit onto a square centimetre. With utter precision, and it's got to mass produce these things by the billion.
And that's why it's been an evolutionary process. So if we just make incremental improvements every year, so the companies that make the tools that can achieve higher precision, the companies that make the metrology tools to be able to inspect with higher precision but with the same number of wafers per minute, and then the researchers who develop new materials that will allow transistors to function properly as they are shrunk down. All of these efforts in parallel to allow transistors to scale down in size steadily by 30% every 2 years. This is what has resulted in exponential improvement in the last 6 decades.
Even back then, in the late 1990s, we were talking about whether you could make computers with carbon nanotubes, or people saying it'd be easy to do with light, all sorts of revolutionary changes. But you're saying it's sort of tweaks to the manufacturing process, tweaks to the materials you're using, tweaks to the very design of the chips, all have contributed along the way.
Because you might know the cost of building a leading edge manufacturing facility in fab is well over $2 billion today. That level of investment, you cannot build that up for a new type of transistor like a carbon nanotube transistor so easily. The technology used to manufacture silicon-based transistors was developed over 50, 60 years, and that's why it's very difficult that some brand new transistor technology will come in and overtake silicon. Even if it provided for better performance, it would not provide for lower cost.
You are one of the innovators who's responsible for one of the developments that kept the whole chip industry going. I'll call them FinFETs, it's the word, a different kind of configuration of transistors that sort of squeezed a bit more work out of the silicon. About 20 years ago you did that. What's it feel like to have made such a profound contribution to the industry?
Certainly it's gratifying looking back. I remember decades ago around that time frame when our research team had developed the FinFET that's now used in our leading edge chips for computing and other applications. I asked the students, what would be the mission of our research group if we wanted to describe it in one sentence? And in the end, we agreed that we want to design these semiconductor devices that are going to change the world. And so we look back now, we see the impact that information and communication technology has had on people and society, the way we socialize, connect with each other, the way we conduct business, the way we conduct ourselves, the way we continue to physically isolated. I can say that we have achieved our mission, making devices that change the world.
I would say I like that idea as a research proposal to change the world. But, I guess the computer I'm talking to you on has a mobile phone I contact you with, has these in. They are everywhere, aren't they?
Yes, they're ubiquitous. And they're mostly invisible. They're hidden. So this is one of the challenges. Public, young students, they don't see the chips, so they don't understand that in a modern vehicle, when you buy a car off the lot, the new cars today have thousands of chips in them. You need a chip to control the heat in the car, but also to blow down the windows, in addition to maximizing the performance of your engine and your motor. But they're just taken for granted, and this is one thing we're trying to change now, to really elevate the visibility of what our industry is doing. But the exciting thing is that the number of computing devices, this is an interesting fact, the number of computing devices already exceeds the number of people in the world today. So within the next few years, next 5 years, there will be about 350 billion computing devices that are connected wirelessly. So if you think that there are, let's say, less than 8 billion people by the end of this decade, that's a lot more interconnected computing devices than people in the world. And so this is why we're all looking forward to an age of ambient intelligence, where our devices, our surroundings, have some embedded intelligence to help us live more healthy and productive lives.
Sujay, thank you so much for talking to us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And we've a link to the 75th anniversary on the Science and Action webpage at bbcworldservice.com. And that's where we're going to whistle off. I'm Graham Keith, and this was Science and Action. After the break, Crowd Science takes on the slippery topic of friction.
You're listening to ABC News Radio.
In today's media landscape, where social media has almost become the norm, I think it's made media outlets like ABC News Radio more relevant and more important than ever, as we bring you that live, comprehensive, accurate news at a minute's notice, without the noise, without the gossip, without the inaccuracies, without the opinion.
This is ABC News Radio.
Thanks for your company here on ABC News Radio across Australia. My name is Leslie. I'll be back with you with a full news update in half an hour. We'll take you to our broadcast partners at Deutsche Welle for
was only water everywhere you look. Most of our maniatos were just swallowed up. They've totally disappeared.
Some Australians have already started moving away from the mainland to the island state of Tasmania to escape climate disasters.
We've been seeing climate refugees, bushfire refugees, flood refugees coming to Tasmania for the last decade. And with recent events on the mainland, we fully expect that we'll start to see that flow carry through.
And in India, young people have started to clean up a lagoon to stop people from migrating.
Earlier, there was a lot of migration, but it has come down drastically. Now people are involved in tourism and activities relating to the water body. Livelihoods have improved, and this is encouraging.
Coming up now on this week's episode of DW's World in Progress. And we start the show in Australia, in the nation's tiny state, Tasmania. That's where many people who are desperate to avoid heat waves topping 50 degrees Celsius or well over 120 degrees Fahrenheit have fled to. Tasmania isn't plagued by bushfires or floods. It has 4 distinct seasons. Andreas Stummer went to explore how the climate refugees are doing in their new homes, and Neil King has the story.
A heatwave in southern Australia, wildfires in Victoria, flooding in New South Wales. Every time a natural disaster hits the mainland, Kim Morgan's telephone starts to ring. Morgan is the director of Peters World for Property, a leading real estate agency in Hobart. In the heart of Tasmania's capital city, Hobart, an imposing sculpture made of sandstone, the Southern Cross, rises up over a round concrete basin. Seawater splashes against 3 miniature bronze ships. The monument commemorates Tasmania's namesake, Abel Tasman, the first European explorer to reach the island in 1642. Back then, Tasman only spent a few weeks here, sailing along the coast. But today, there's a group of new arrivals who intend to stay. They're not from the other end of the world, like Tasman though. In fact, they're from Australia, climate refugees in their own country.
We've been seeing climate refugees, bushfire refugees, flood refugees coming to Tasmania for the last decade. And with recent events on the mainland, we fully expect that we'll start to see that flow carry through. In fact, we've had that period of people moving here for a long time. You look at what's happening around the world with climate and with these global politics and sorts of things, it makes places like Tasmania seem like a pretty good place to live. It's a good time to be here, living on a little island in the Southern Ocean. For it to use all of this.
In the late 90s, as Morgan recalls, the average price of a house in Hobart was €300,000. That's roughly $290,000. Today, it's twice that. He says the climate refugees from mainland Australia were what caused Tasmania's real estate market to pick up.
The first quarter of this financial year saw 6.3% growth, so prices have skyrocketed. Curious how Tasmania's population is still hovering around a 500,000 resident population. South-West Queensland and Melbourne and Sydney, they talk of population growth in hundreds of thousands per annum over the last years. We don't seem to be seeing that here.
Some 500,000 residents live here on an island that's roughly the size of Scotland and located 250 kilometres south of Australia. Tasmania might not be the end of the earth, but one can certainly see where the world ends from here. The island is the last inhabited piece of land until Antarctica. Many who grow up here eventually grow restless and head for Australia to study, where there's more work and more people. Jason Byrne is a professor of human geography and planning at the University of Tasmania. He says it's the Australian longing for the sun, the beach, and the eternal summer that people leave Tasmania for. But the reality of the situation is now the country experiencing record temperatures, droughts, and a climate that's getting hotter and hotter.
What was once a kind of great idea to go somewhere warm now looks like it will be a curse. Let's take Sydney for an example. Not so long ago, a few years back, Sydney had official temperatures that were around about 48 degrees. The unofficial temperatures topped 50. Now 50 degrees is incredibly hot. For people who are not familiar with 50 degrees, it's like an oven. Human tissue starts breaking down if you stay outside for too long at 50 degrees. And that's now. gets to 55. That's unlivable.
Byrne is an expert in climate and mobility, and not just because of his job either. He too is a climate migrant. He grew up in the western city of Perth and later studied in the US, where he also earned his PhD, specialising in sustainable urban planning. Back home in Australia, he taught at the Griffith University on the Gold Coast. It's Australia's 6th largest city and lies on floodplain directly on the coast southeast of Brisbane. It's a region that's hard hit by cyclones every year.
We were on the Gold Coast when the tail end of Cyclone Debbie came through. There was huge flooding. We were deeply worried because the main coal line, railway line carrying coal into the power station, was severed. Well, knowing what I do as a city planner, I went, this is not going to work. We need to get out of here.
Byrne got job offers from universities across the country, and true to his profession, he compared climate models, statistics, and population charts. He finally decided to head nearly 1,800 kilometres due south to Tasmania, and for good reason too.
We've got plenty of food. We export lots and lots of food, so that's not an issue. We have a stable water supply, stable government, reliable infrastructure, educational institutions that are world-class, good school systems, a healthcare system that's under stress at the moment with the population, which would be a major issue. But all of those are manageable when you look at the scale of the changes that are happening with climate change.
Aside from the fact that there aren't any cyclones there, Tasmania has one advantage that beats out all of Australia's other states. It's located on the 40th parallel, and its moderate climate is determined by the waters that surround it. Here's how climate researcher Nick Earle from the University of Tasmania puts it. While the Australian continent gets